Hey everyone, this upload is going to be a little different than usual. Last night, I was finishing some work on the back end of the channel when I realized it was almost midnight. It was quiet, a cool breeze had worked its way through my window, and while I was initially thinking of doing a list of 5 scary themed stories for this project, a nightmare I just couldn't shake lingered in my mind. I had a wild hair to write this horrible imagery into a terrifying story, and it would be a lie if I tried to sell that I didn't spook myself out a little bit with this one. What dwells in the moments following our final breaths? How much time passes before someone is truly beyond saving? For how long does the brain actually produce electricity after the heart stops? Join me as we follow a lone mortician through one terrifying graveyard shift that will make you question everything you thought you knew about life and death. I call this one John Doe. The hour was growing late, and though my morgue, which served a very small township and was located in the middle of the forest, was always quiet, the silence of these late nights always felt a bit heavier. I was just finishing up the body of Sharon, an older woman who had passed last Thursday. Earlier, I had reassured her family that I would be gentle and take good care of their grandmother's body, a simple promise that every mortician makes, which made it all the more ironic in that my hands were currently removing her organs. If the public was made familiar with the process, I swear more people would opt for cremation instead. An hour passed, and after I'd finished preparing Sharon, I laid her body carefully to rest inside of her desired casket. She looked fast asleep, which was pretty much what morticians aimed for with everybody, though that goal could be harder to hit dependent on the state of the corpse when it came in. Now, it was time to focus on my last body for the night, a John Doe, meaning a corpse that had arrived with no name, no identification, and that no family had yet claimed. Sadly, this John Doe wasn't all that old, maybe in his mid-40s. He had a full head of salt and pepper hair that was cut short into a neat but slightly wild part, thick eyebrows, was clean-shaven, and upon inspection had straight teeth and appeared to have taken pretty good care of himself. When I glanced at the cause of death, it surprised me. Exposure. Very interesting indeed. I set to work with preliminary measurements and quickly got lost in my thoughts. The solitude of this job could get to some people, especially those morticians who were ill-equipped on an emotional level. I was different though. It always brought me peace. Suddenly, and without warning, John's hand twitched violently to the right. My heart froze for a moment, but I quickly shook away this unease. Post-mortem reflexes, something that always scares new morticians but is actually extremely normal. Nonetheless, I reached down and checked his vitals. John Doe was definitely dead. I set to work on subsequent procedures, a chill running down my spine. I glanced around the dimly lit room. I could see a few closer trees, but beyond those, the windows of my workspace were pitch black with the darkness outside. I had just started to relax again when suddenly, something I would not deem normal in the least occurred. Surpassing his previous twitch, John Doe's arm shot straight up into the air, seemingly pointing at the ceiling. I dropped my tools in shock and stumbled backwards. "Pull it together," I muttered to myself. There aren't even enough fluids in his body for it to be alive. This is definitely weird, but it's just reflexes. Just more extreme reflexes. I tried to stay focused and get back to the job at hand, but it would be a lie if I said I wasn't completely creeped out. After fumbling through my work for a few minutes, I decided to take a break and get some fresh air on the front porch of my building. When I stepped outside, a cool wind blasted my face while simultaneously snapping me back to reality. I considered the John Doe, and then, though I tried to keep my mind off the topic for fear of spooking myself even worse, I began to reminisce over an old school colleague and his theory on death. Disturbingly, this theory wasn't one morticians wanted to entertain if they were looking to stay sober. He'd believed that instead of a thin line between life and death, as most professionals see it, that this obscure middle area was actually more of a gray zone. That the brain retained electricity and thought waves for much longer than previously suspected. He even believed that at some point, when medical technology had advanced far enough, it would eventually be possible to bring a human body back to life far beyond the handful of minutes that we owned now. Maybe even days after medical death, or weeks. I glanced at my phone. Lost in thought, I hadn't realized that nearly a half hour had passed. It was almost 1 o'clock. I had to get back in there. But as I entered the morgue, my jaw dropped. The table that John Doe had been laying on was empty. The body was gone. Was I losing my mind? The room began to spin, and I lost my breath for a moment. Was I just imagining this whole thing? I grabbed my phone from my pocket, trying to decide what to do, who to call. Even though I didn't realize it in the moment, some part of my brain, likely the midbrain in some sort of survival instinct, had guided me on autopilot towards my office before my present self had arrived at the very same conclusion, that I needed to get out of there, that I needed to go home and get some sleep. I opened my office door, flicked on the light, and let out a scream. There he was, John Doe, propped up in the chair at my desk. His still lifeless eyes staring straight through me, his face twisted into a toothy, macabre grin. Thanks for joining me for my little tale of terror. If you enjoyed hearing this scary story, subscribe to my channel, like this upload, and share me with anyone you think could use a good fright. Pleasant dreams.